Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today I finally have the first version of the TBM-930 guide ready and available for purchase. Now please stand by, don't skip ahead yet, because there's a couple disclaimers I want you guys to be aware of. The TBM-930 guide, first of all, is a guide that focuses on everything that you could possibly need to complete a flight from Salt Lake City, Utah, all the way down to Denver, Colorado. It walks through everything from the mods that I use, getting them installed, cockpit tours, creating your flight plan, entering the flight plan either via the MSFS import or through entering the flight plan manually, a full G3000 walkthrough. So this guide sort of doubles up as both a TBM-930 guide and a G3000 tutorial. It breaks down everything in the G3000 and how to get to all the different screens and navigate through. It also walks through, again, creating your flight plan in SimBrief, breaking down the flight plan so you know what you're looking at, entering it into the computer, flying your routes, setting up your approaches, etc., all the way down to Shutdown in Denver, Colorado. Now, something I want you guys to be aware of. We have two ways of which you can acquire my guides. One is by being a Tier 2 Patreon subscriber. That's $10 a month or more. Or through the PayPal donation link that you guys can find in the description below. Again, $10 or more, and let me know what guide you need. Now, there should be an email address flashing on the screen right now, or up on the screen right now. Make sure if you use the PayPal method, if you just want to donate and buy this one guide, make sure that you email that link after you've made your donation, letting me know which guide you want. Otherwise, there's no way for me to know, and I'm going to be sitting there waiting, emailing you back saying, hey, which guide do you want, blah, 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 and there's going to be a delay in you getting your product. Now, what I recommend is going through the Patreon subscription. If you go through Patreon, you get access to the A320 guide. This is very similar, extremely detailed guide. You get the G1000 guide, and you get the TBM-930/G3000 guide that's included with it. And then any other guides that I continue to work on. These guides are going to continue to be updated. I've got updates coming for the A320 and the G1000 guides later in the week, now that I've got this one knocked out of the park. Again, I do want to apologize to everyone for the delay. February was sort of a trying month for me. Real world kept stepping in the way, unfortunately. Anyway, so if you guys would like to acquire these guides, now you know how. Let's get on to the tutorial. Today's video, we are going to fly the route and fly step by step using the guide that you have now seen before you. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the plane. All right, so for our first steps, the first thing we can do is make sure that the cockpit and cabin are locked and secured. So let's go ahead and get on that. We're going to close our door here. Push the button here to lock it. Close the outside luggage door. I'm going to move to the back seat here, pick my head up. Now you can do this from the passenger seat, but I have the camera view set up. I highly recommend setting up your own camera views in this aircraft. It's real easy to do and much more fun. And the other thing is, if you're using this mod, you need to make sure that you lock the passenger door. Even if you don't open it before flight, it is unlocked by default. So, like for example, I'll show you what you guys will see. A good giveaway, if you notice, the door is open. Okay, and this is how the plane loads when you're using the mod. By default, it's unlocked. Okay, so you just come in here, grab that little button, and boom, we're good to go. All right, so cabin doors are locked and secured. Forward luggage compartment is closed. Passenger oxygen switch set to standby. Oxygen master switch set to on. Exterior lights are all off. Interior lights on as needed. Crash bar is currently down. Starter is off. And ignition is set to auto. Auxiliary boost pumps are off, and fuel selection is set to manual. AutoPilot trims are off. Air conditioning needs to be off. And let's see here. Circuit breaker lights are off as well. De-icing system is off. Inertial separator is off. Parking brake reset and back on. Landing gear control handle down. Pressurization switch is set to off. And hot airflow needs to be set on the floorboard. All right, and moving back to the throttle area, manual override is off. Fuel tank selection needs to be either at the left or right fuel tank, but not in the off position, so we're currently on the left tank. Let's clear that. Alternate static source needs to be pushed in and off. Emergency ram air needs to be pushed in and closed as well. And ESS bus tie is covered. All right, now we're going to get ready to get into the engine start. First thing we're going to do before we do that is we're going to load the aircraft, make sure it's got the proper fuel. I don't worry about too much with the weights and balances with the TBM in regard to I don't adjust all the weights, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But that's just because Microsoft Flight Simulator, it adjusts it really weird. It's a real pain in the butt dealing with the weights in this thing. So I typically just set my weight and let Microsoft Flight Simulator distribute it as it chooses. As long as I'm in proper CG, I don't care. Now with this next step with the engine engine start, there's a couple things that tend to be a point of contention when I mention these in previous videos. So I want you guys to give you guys a heads up that everything for engine start, taxi, takeoff, and landing, I got directly out of the TBM-930 Pilot's Operating Handbook. Okay, so this isn't speculation. I didn't take this as guessing. I know some pilots do things differently. For example, I'm sure any TBM lovers like myself have watched Steve Okniewo's TBM was 850 flights. I love it. And like, for example, one of the things he does, he turns his oxygen typically off or on after he clears 10,000 feet. The Pilot's Operating Handbook says it gets turned on before engine start. Okay, so before taxi, excuse me. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page there, that yes, there may be some differences, and as the pilot in command, you're welcome to do as you choose, but I stuck with the operating handbook for a few of the items that I discovered. Okay, all right, so let's get after it. So getting into our flight plan here, you see chapter 7.2, this is all in there. I'm going to take everything I need right from the guide. I'm not going to use anything else. I want to show you guys that you can do this all from the guide. We're going to be looking at our block fuel here of 901 gallons. Okay, so, or 901 pounds, excuse me, of fuel. So let's go ahead and get the aircraft loaded with that. All right, so back in the sim, we're going to hit our weights and balances here. We're going to go to our fuel. Currently at 978 pounds, so we just need to reduce it a little bit. Won't be too bad. 900 pounds, right on the money. We're looking for 901, so I'm going to call that good. Again, for the payload, it's up to you guys. I'm not worrying about the payload. Again, it's different than when we load in like the A320. Just adding weight, it distributes it all real. It just isn't fun to deal with. So I'm not going to worry about the weight. You guys can if you choose. Just make sure your CG stays within these boundaries. All right, but let's go ahead and move on. We got our fuel on board, so now let's start the aircraft up. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up top. We're going to go crash bar up. We're going to go source to battery, generator to main. Now, normally we would want to test the audio warnings here, but unfortunately they're not functional, but I'll show you guys where you can at least find them. If we come up here and we turn around, here's going to be our audio warnings. Here would be the stall warning, okay? But unfortunately, again, they're not functional. We can clear that master caution. Let's see here, de-icing lights. Let's come down a bit. I'm going to move the screen over like this. De-icing lights, we'll give those a quick test. Verify all that is good. Landing gear annunciator lights. Everything tested good. And check down on the landing gear status. 3 blinkings. We're good. Landing gear is down and locked. Again, coming over to the MFD. Power it on as well. We're going to verify adequate fuel is on board. We are good to go. 67 gallons per tank. So we are definitely more than enough gas to get to where we want to go there. And then we need to make sure that the residual inlet temperature is below 150 degrees Celsius, which they are. We need to make sure we have at least 24 volts for a battery start, which we're on is good. And then auxiliary boost pumps, we need to come back up top. We're going to make sure auxiliary boost pumps are on. And touchscreen controllers. Come down here to our touchscreen controller. We're going to make sure our timer is set. Now all we're going to do is hit start once we're ready to do the engine start. So we're going to hold off on that for 2 seconds here. Let's zip these guys up. We can just clear the master warning, master caution for now. Next thing we're going to do is give that timer a start. Come up here and go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi on the starter. Come back down to our screen here. We're looking for 13% on the NG. There we go. Move our throttle. This can sometimes be a pain. I hate it when it does this. Into the low idle position. Inlet temperature should not be above 870 degrees for more than 20 seconds and shouldn't be above 1,000 for more than 5 seconds. We're looking at looking for above 30% in less than 30 seconds. We got that. 52%, we're going to go to high idle and then over to flight idle. And the starter annunciator that was up here turned off. And that should happen at 52%. Oops. And come back up. Clear the master caution for the annunciator. Verify all cast messages are legit here. So stall heater is not on. Pitot heater is not on. That's fine. Auxiliary boost pump set to on. Auto or fuel selection needs to be set to auto. And the bleed is currently off. So what we're going to do is to solve that, we're going to come up top, take our fuel selection, put that up into automatic. We're going to want our air conditioning as desired after we set our auxiliary boost pumps into auto. Autopilot trims can be set to on. Come down, air conditioning can now be turned back on. And let's move this over a little bit. Okay. Dump, pressurization dump should be set to norm and covered, and bleed needs to be on either auto or max diff. Auto is going to be the most comfortable. It's going to adjust the pressurization in the aircraft at the smoothest of rates, where max diff is going to do it very quickly but can cause a little discomfort in the cabin. Alright, so we can go ahead and stop and reset our timers. We're good there. Let's go back to the MFD here. Alright, now in the interest of following today's tutorial guide, I'm not going to worry about using ATC because I don't want any of our designated points to change. Departure, runways, SIDS, etc. Okay, so today we're going to simulate. ATC has given us clearance. So we're going to go to our navcom. We're going to go to our audios and radios. Oh, back up. No, we're not. We're going to go to our transponder, and we're just going to simulate a transponder code. So we'll say it's 2537. And we're going to switch this guy on over to on. Press enter. We can see transponders on and transmitting. Okay, and we can go back to MFD from here, and I think we're about ready to enter in our flight plan. Okay, now here is our flight plan that we're going to be taking off and using today. We're going to be coming out of Salt Lake City using runway 34 right, using the Rugged 1 departure with the Purdy transmission, nice. Yes, I'm a motorhead. Transition. And be going from there direct over to camper, from camper onto the Long Z1 arrival, and then coming in on the 3-4 left ILS approach. All right. So entering that in very quickly into our flight plan here. We're going to start with flight plan. We need to tell the aircraft where we are. So Kilo Sierra Lima Charlie, press enter. Then we're going to say where are we going. We're going to, nope, back up. Going to Kilo Delta Echo November, enter. And then we need to add our waypoint in between our stars. So that's going to be this guy here. This is our SID, our standard instrument departure, with the transition onto our waypoint, our flight route. And this is again, the star standard terminal arrival route into Denver. So the waypoints in between, even if there were multiple, this is what we'd be worrying about here. Now it's important to remember that at the time of making this recording, I do not know of any way to enter airways into the flight computer for the TBM-930. So you'll see that this is direct to camper. Now this is what our flight route, but if it had, for example, I don't know, just throwing out an airway here, the J104 camper, okay, that would mean that we were using the J104 airway to get to camper. You're never going to enter in an airway. Now, as far as I'm aware that I have seen, it's real easy to determine airways versus waypoints. Airways, stars, and SIDS, from what I have seen, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but from all that I have seen, they always have a number in them. Airways, SIDS, and stars always seem to have a number in the title somewhere. Sometimes they're just numbers, but or numbers in a single letter, right? So they're pretty easy to identify. But your waypoints are always going to be a word without any numbers, that I've seen thus far. Again, there may be stipulations to that, I'm sure, but just giving you a general rule of thumb, if you will. So let's get on to entering this in. So we're going to enter that waypoint in. So we're going to add en route waypoint. And it is Kilo Alpha, what is it? Mike Papa Romeo. Hit enter. Now this is the only one we have. So if we were to enter any more waypoints, we would hit add en route waypoint again until we had all of our waypoints in between the SIDS and stars in there. So we're just going to hit done in this case. because we don't have any more. And so now we enter our SIDS and stars. So to do that, we're going to go back, go to procedures, our departure. We're coming out of Salt Lake City. Now we need to select the departure we're going to use. I said we're going to be using the rugged one. The transition, I said we're going to be using the Purdy transition. Did I say transmission again? I think I did. And then the runway departure, we're going to be using runway 34 right. Okay, and then we got that. So runway Salt Lake City, using runway 34 right to come off on the rugged one. Departure to hit the Purdy transition. Hit load. And we can hit load again. Oh, it already hit load. There it goes. Yeah, should come back to this menu on its own. Now, the arrival. Okay, the arrival, we're going to be using the long Z1. So we're going to scroll down a little bit. There's our... Oh, I hate it when it does that. There's the long Z1. And again, where's our camper transition? So this is from the camper transition onto the long Z1. You sort of have to read these backwards when it comes to the arrivals. They're a little weird. And then the runway we are going for today is ILS 34 left. So runway 34 left, there it is. And hit load. And then now the approach. So coming off of the long Z1 arrival onto the 34 left approach. So again, coming into K Denver. I don't know why I say it like that. I do it every time. ILS 34 left, there it is. And then from here, this is where it gets a little bit trickier to figure out where you want to go and how you want to make your approach. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to look at our approach chart. And again, this is another piece of information that is in the guide. So I state here that we are going to be coming in from the north. As we are in a small aircraft, we're going to be using the teller as our transition point. Now, the reason why I state that we're using a small aircraft is we don't have to make that big wide turn that some of the airliners do. And again, all of this changes when you're using ATC. When it comes to ATC, make sure you do what ATC tells you to do. But we could either come all the way out to the Dora, or we can just come in here at Teller and make our approach into the Kaler transition onto the airfield. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is we could go direct to caller if we wanted, but I'm going to be using the Teller. That's what we're doing in the guide, so that's what I'm going to stick with. Now, you can see we have remove, we have load and activate. Don't hit load and activate. You won't like what that does. You don't ever want to do that until you actually reach your destination ready to activate the approach. However, activating the approach mode will take care of that for you. So we just need to hit load. All right, and again, don't activate the approach. And we're done there. We can hit home. Next thing we can do is pick our head up a little bit here, and we can check our flight plan. Now, using the bottom rotary here, as long as you're in the MFD section, you can see the bottom rotary will zoom in and out. But you can also pan it. So if we give that a quick tap, there we go. And all you're going to do is put your mouse in here and then drag it the direction you want to go. Now, I'm holding that mouse button down. So if I want to go this way, and sometimes you have to click it and let it loose. But it's not too bad. So it can be, and it's a little bit better the more zoomed out you are, and get your cursor where you want it. And then zoom in. Makes it a bit easier. Oh, I hate dealing with that. And you can see why. The more zoomed in you're in. Oh, and I went the wrong way that whole time anyway. There we go. Anyway, so here you can come in and sort of verify what your waypoints are going to look like. Okay, and as long as you don't see any weird backtracks, things like that, things that they're like, no, I don't really need to do this, you know, you don't need to worry about. If for any reason you needed to make an edit, just come to your flight plan, find the waypoint that you want removed. So if, for example, we wanted grays taken out, we click on grays, hit remove waypoint. We could set it direct. I need to go direct here. There will be a point in this flight we're probably going to have to use this, so I'll show you guys that later. Activate the leg to that waypoint, which would be from here to here. And then you can also move it around. But we'll talk about that later on. That will be information coming to the guide later on, how to edit waypoints in detail. But for now, that's pretty simple. Oh, and then when you go to flight plan, you'll notice it comes back up. Just click the waypoint again to remove that window. All right, so our flight plan is set. Our weights and balances are set. We are now ready to get the aircraft ready for taxi and get out of here. All right, so in preparing the aircraft for taxi, obviously the first thing we need to make sure to do is make sure our altimeter is set right. So we're going to be setting this guy up for 3001. Not using ATC, what I do is I just Google it. So for example, I did KSLC meet our information, right? And then it pops right up and you get your altimeter information. In this case, it was 3001. So we're going to set both of our altimeters to 3001. And that may not be what it currently is. Again, I'm sticking with the guide. All right, let's see here. And the next thing we want to do is set our CDI to the FMS. So that way we follow the flight plan we just entered. So there we go. There's the FMS entry. De-icing we want to set as required, but pretty quiet or warm day outside. We're at 7 degrees outside temperature, so we should be fine. Skies are clear. I'm not worried about any icing up there. So we're going to go with the inertial separator, though. It does need to come on before taxi. The purpose of the inertial separator is to keep foreign object debris or FOD from getting sucked into the intake and damaging the engine. All right, and before taxi, you need to make sure flaps are up. The flaps hang low enough to the ground that if there is FOD on the ground, rocks, things like that, you don't want them getting kicked up and thrown at the flap surfaces. So flaps remain up all the way until we take the runway for takeoff. Flight controls, verify all flight controls are functioning and adequate. And you can do this a number of different ways. But what is always fun for me, just because it's fun to look at them, is going to the external view and checking them out because I enjoy that. There it goes. I don't know why it does that. Been having some really weird issues with the cameras lately. Really tripping me out. Alright, and you will get a master caution indicating that the inertial separator is on. That's perfectly fine, and the reason for that being is that the inertial separator actually reduces the amount of engine power currently available. Alright, and so now that we have the aircraft configured the way we want now, we can do a couple of different things. You can do this while you're taxiing, or you can do it before taxi. It's totally up to you. In the event or for the purpose of simulation, we're going to go ahead and do it now. That way we're taken care of before we get to the runway, and that is set up the autopilot panel for takeoff. All right. In setting up the autopilot panel for takeoff, what I mean by that is just get everything ready so that way once we're airborne, we click our yaw damper, we click the autopilot, the aircraft takes over and we're up and moving. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set our target altitude. Now we're at 4,300 feet. We're going to simulate that we have been given clearance up to 12,000. And you can either wait for ATC to give this to you if you guys are using like Pilot to ATC or VATSIM, anything like that. You know, obviously you follow their instructions. But in our case, we're going to simulate. We've been given clearance of 12,000. Now we want to say how we're going to get to 12,000. Well, I want to use the flight level change, okay, which essentially makes us take off at a specific speed. We're going to climb at a specific speed, not so much a specific angle. Okay, and to do that, we're going to use this wheel here, and we're going to set our target speed at 120 knots. So we're going to use for our climb out today. And actually, let me double check that. 124 knots is best rate or best speed for the TBM-930, and 100 knots is best climb angle. All right, so we have our target altitude set. We have our target speed set. Now, as far as heading, I'm going to show you guys a couple different things when we get there, but I'm going to go ahead and select nav because we're basically going to be taking off in the direction that we need to intercept our flight plan. So now what's going to happen is after we take off, get the wheels up, get the flaps up, aircraft stable, all I have to do is tap the yaw damper, tap the autopilot, let go, and she's going to climb at 124 knots up to our target altitude, 12,000 feet, while flying our flight plan that has been entered into the computer. Okay, it makes it a lot easier to get it rather than trying to fiddle with all that after you're airborne. All right. Okay, so the other thing we can do also is turn our flight directors on. Come up top before taxi. We're going to set our taxi lights on. Make sure the nav light's on. You can turn the pulse lights on if you wish. Make sure strobe lights remain off until we reach the runway. Everything else should be good to go. Doing a last quick check, making sure that I've gotten everything that we need to talk about. And I have indeed. So from here, The only thing else we're going to be watching is our taxi speed, which is going to be right down here under the ground speed. You want to keep that between 15 and 20 knots. You know, as long as there aren't any obstructions, things like that, you can get taxiing pretty quick. All right, parking brake released. Let's get her out of here. Alright, so right before we take the runway here, we're going to come up top and we're going to make sure nav lights again are on, landing light is turned on, strobe lights are on, auxiliary boost pump set to auto, fuel selection set to auto, ignition set to auto, autopilot and trim systems are turned on, crash bar is up, source is on battery, generators on main, oxygen is on. Come back down to the lower view here and make sure our pitot heaters and stall heaters are also turned on. Inertial separator is turned on. Pressurization set to auto or max diff, and flaps set to takeoff. Now we are ready to take the runway. Alright, so as we take the runway, the only thing that I am going to recommend is that you give this heading button a tap. That sets the heading bug onto your current heading, which in our case hopefully is the runway heading as long as we're lined up. And this is really important in case you are given an instruction to, or I should say really handy, if you're given the instruction to fly runway heading for X amount of time, whatever, this makes it real easy. So instead of using the nav mode, we would just switch to heading mode, and then when we activate our yaw damper and autopilot, we just stay on the current heading. Again, just another trick to help, you know, facilitate the flight a little bit easier. Takeoff's going to look like running up our torque to 100% up here on the top. We're going to be looking for 90 knots on the rotation speed. Once we get rotation speed, we're going to be looking for 10 degrees of climb. Once we get positive rate, we're going to go gears up at 115 knots, flaps up. Once flaps are up, gears up, we can do yaw damper and autopilot and get the system in control of the aircraft and hopefully have a nice smooth flight. So let's see what that looks like. Let's run her up. Feet off the brakes. Trying to maintain that center line. My rudder pedals are really touchy all of a sudden today, which is weird because I haven't touched anything, but they are. There's 90 knots, giving a rotation. Positive rate, gear coming up. Approaching flap speed, flaps coming up. Oops. There we go, hit the wrong one. Alright, we got positive rate. I'm going to bounce around for a second here just because I don't have my controls set up quite right on this one. I forgot to map the yaw damper and autopilot. Aircraft's in control. We should now climb at 124 knots up to 12,000 feet following our flight plan. Alright, now the inertial or inlet temperature is high because we need to reduce our throttle. So we're going to pull some power back. And that's just the ILS signal we're hearing as we're crossing over it. And you can maintain about 95% or so on the torque. So just slowly advance it. It takes a second for it to catch up, so make your throttle adjustments a little slower than normal. And then when it comes time to... Oh, see, there it is again, getting too hot. So I'm going to pull back a little bit. There you go. We'll just be watching the inlet temperature. 80% is where it wants to be, it looks like. Even that's running a little hot. So about 80% is where we're going to keep it today, because otherwise it gets mad at me. Alright, so we're climbing through 8,000. TBM-930 cleared to 18,000. Alright, cool. Cleared to 18,000 TBM-930. So we're going to increase our altitude. And what the trick is here is, as long as your current altitude doesn't come within 1,000 feet of your target altitude, and you'll see this flight level change to ALT. Once it changes that, that means you're in altitude hold mode, and you need to re-engage flight control in order to change your altitude again. So, but as long as you catch it before it reaches that point, all you need to do is adjust your target altitude, and the aircraft will continue to climb. All right, we're coming up on 10,000 feet here, so we can come up top, and we're going to go ahead and kill the landing lights. Everything else can stay on. I don't worry about the pulse lights, but if that's your thing, by all means. I couldn't see anything in the pilot's operational handbook where they were specifically required. The strobe light was, but couldn't see anything about anything else. And from here, we're just going to continue to follow out our flight plan. Now, once we get to 18,000 feet, we'll need to change our altimeters back to the standard pressure of 2.902. So I'll catch you guys as we get closer to then. Again, I won't leave any changes out of the video. Any changes that I make to this aircraft, no matter how small, they will be in this video. So I'll catch you guys when we get closer to 18,000. Alright, now we're passing through 14,000 feet here. The other thing that we can do now at this point is we're in clear skies, there's no clouds, there's no concern about ice or any debris that we may fly into with a cloud, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the inertial separator off. Now with the inertial separator turned off, you're going to want to watch your torque and RPM, specifically the torque. You can see it's climbing with the inertial separator turned off. And you can see our inlet temperature went up a little bit as well. So again, you may find yourself having to reduce power a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. Looks like we're doing all right. We are at negative 16 degrees Celsius at this point, so you do want to watch your surfaces. Keep an eye out for any icing, but as long as you don't see anything, we can keep the de-icing off. Oh, and there it is right there. So we're over-torquing the aircraft with the inertial separator turned off. So we're going to bring that back down, and there we go. Our inlet temperature is fine, and that's because of how high we are. Getting high enough where it's not so much of an issue. We're right at 100%, so I'm going to keep an eye on that for a minute. Now we're coming up on 18,000. We're going to go ahead and clear ourselves all the way up to 24,000 feet. But you can see what happens. It switched to that altitude hold. So I'm going to set my altitude here. There's our 24,000 feet cruise level today. And we're going to go back into flight change mode. And then I'm going to adjust our speed down a bit to that 124 knots for our best rate. Okay? Alright, now the good news here is we have cleared our 18,000 feet, so we can set our altimeters back to 2.902. This one here, just give it a quick click, and it automatically adjusts. And now it's just a matter of flying our route all the way over to Denver. So we've got about 300 miles to go, about an hour and 20 minutes or so of flight time. You can see we have an endurance time of 2 hours and 4 minutes. We got plenty of time up in the air, and that will even increase a bit. Our range will increase a bit once we get out of this climb. So basically, I'm going to see you guys when we get closer to the top of descent. What I'll do is probably 20-25 miles before we need to actually start descending. I'm going to show you guys two different methods that you can use when deciding how you want to descend. This is simulation, so it's totally up to you guys what you find more enjoyable for you. That's the end game here. It's not necessarily by the book. Always with simulation, it's about what are you having fun with doing. And you can see this is right on the edge, so I'm going to bring that power back just a little bit more. Sort of yelling at me there. But from here on out, it's just a nice little cruise. So I'll catch you guys when we get closer to descending. Alright, so we're still a ways out yet. We're at probably almost 125, 150 miles away yet. But I figured this is a good time to start talking about some options for descent. So coming straight out of the guide, you can use a couple different things. So first thing you're going to need, no matter which way you go, is the touchdown descent zone. Or touchdown zone elevation, gosh. And that's 5,327 feet above sea level. Okay. Now this is according to the Navigraph charts that I use. If you guys don't use Navigraph and you fly IFR a lot or doing a lot of flight planning like this, I really recommend it. Yes, it's a paid subscription. You get the updated nav data. Now, I know Microsoft's been doing pretty good about keeping that up to date, but you get a bunch of other things that are super, super helpful. And for example, if we go to KDen here, first we can find our star, Long Z1 arrival. All right, and we're going to be coming in from right here at camper. So we're going to start rolling in here, and we're going to come down here through Dork. I just love that one. Archie through Baba, and then our final position being Hyman. Hi, Mom. But anyway, so it'll actually once our aircraft hits this point, it'll actually show our aircraft traveling along these different routes, and it makes it really, really handy because you can see like we're 52.7 miles out, at flight level 270. Come down here, we should be at flight level 190. You have your different restrictions. So for example, here is flight level 210. We need to be between 210 and 16,000 at what was that, funnel, however you want to say it. But we need to be at 250 knots, okay? And then again, it breaks you down, coming all the way down here. Like, hi, Mom, we need to be at 11,000 feet, not above it, not below it, right at 11,000, at 210 knots or below. So it makes it really, really handy. Now, the two different methods that we can do here, if we go to the approach, and this is where I got our touchdown elevation. So we're looking for the 3-4 left ILS approach here. And our touchdown elevation is right here, 5,327 feet is where our wheels will actually touch down. Okay, that's the actual elevation. So what we need to do to figure out, there's two different methods that we can use to descend. If you don't want to follow the star and you just sort of want to plot a general descent, you can use this method here. Okay, and what it is, your current altitude minus the runway elevation, so 24,000 feet minus 5,500 feet, I rounded it up. Okay, equals 18,500. Then you're going to multiply that by 3, gives us 55,500, and then divide that by the descent rate. Okay, so if we're going to descend at 2,000 feet per minute, then we need to start our descent at about 27.75 nautical miles away from the touchdown zone in order to maintain a fairly accurate 3-degree descent line. All right, now we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. We're going to actually follow the star, which again, that walks you through as well here in the guide. We're going to be following these points here and make sure that by Hi Mom, we're at 11,000 feet. Okay. Now, when it comes to managing the descent, you can do just like we did with the climb. We can use the flight level change, which, remember, flight level change will tell the aircraft, I want you to descend maintaining X speed. Now, here's the trick to that. If we were to hit flight level change and we want to descend down to 16,000 feet, we need to make sure whatever speed we pick, okay, is below our current speed, or we need to reduce the throttle, okay? So if we want to descend at 220 knots, we need to reduce the throttle enough where the aircraft has to point the nose down in order to accelerate. If you keep the current speed at the current power setting, the aircraft's never going to descend because it has no way to maintain this speed in the descent. Okay, so what I typically will do is I'll set a descent speed if I'm doing flight level change of either at or below what I'm currently at, and then reduce the power. As the aircraft slows down below your target speed, it will begin pointing nose down in order to maintain it. Okay, so and then the lower throttle setting. So if you point the nose down or pull the throttle back further and further, the lower the throttle setting, typically the lower the nose will descend, okay, which will change your descent rate. Now, for descent, I like to use vertical speed. Okay, I like using flight level change for my climbs because I can maintain a specific speed during the climb. But for the descent, I like to say I want you to descend at this amount feet per minute. In which case, we're going to be using 2,000 feet per minute. Now, we're a ways away out yet, and what we're going to be doing again is following the star. So if we come over here and let's go back to our star and go back to the Long Z1. Okay, we haven't even reached camper yet. And you can see aircraft is outside the chart bounds. This is another really handy thing with Navigraph. But once we reach camper, then we're going to start sort of paying attention. Now here, technically at bike, we're actually too low is where we're at right now for our flight, because we're supposed to be above 27,000 feet at bike. We are too low. Okay, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. And the only reason why I said it as this is the thing about that I've noticed with SimBrief is it tends to shoot you really high, 34,000 feet, 36,000 feet, and I believe the ceiling service level for the TBM-930, I think, is 31,000 feet if memory serves. So, you know, I just picked a number. You know, we weren't going particularly far. But according to the chart, we are supposed to be above 27,000 feet at bike. So after bike, then we're going to start looking at descending. We need to be above 19,000 feet at long Z, right? Or longs, however you want to call it. So what I'm going to do is when we get to bike, I'm going to set our altitude to 19,000 feet and start descending. And then from there, I'm going to set our altitude down to 16,000 feet and keep descending and work our way down, stepping through the different altitude restrictions, 15,000, 13,000, 12,000, and then finally down at 11. From this point, we'll move on to the approach, which will take us down to 10,000 feet, and you guys will see that in a minute. But I'm going to be using, so we're going to be following the star for our descent, which is what I've done also in the guide. Okay, if we come back to the guide, this is the route that we followed as stepping down, and I also walk you guys through how to use the vertical speed and how I managed it. The other thing we're going to want to catch is the altimeter as we approach on or before the point we hit 18,000 feet, ideally. Okay, if you don't have it, then keep it on the standard 2.930 until you get an accurate altimeter setting. Okay, or if you're not worrying about it, then 2.930 will work. Okay, I mean, it is simulation. All right, so we got a ways to go yet. If we take a look here, there's long Z right there, and that's at the point where we want to get to the 19,000 feet. So right about here, Vestal here, is where we will start our descent. So I'm going to catch up with you guys when we get about right there, okay? All right, so we're just about time to descend. Now, the other option you can do is you can go to your flight plan here, and it should save most of it. And you can see here, this is what I was talking about. The restriction was 27,000 feet. So we are low. We're below our restriction. But we're coming up on Vestal here, and from there, we're supposed to go from 27,000 down to 19,000. And so I told you that initially we were going to descend at bike, but looking through here, I noticed that the flight plan holds on a little longer, which is interesting. And this is where I always rely on the charts. If we look here at Vestal here, it shows us at 19,000, even shows at 19,000 here. So there is some discrepancies between the actual charts and what the FMC says. So at this point, let's go ahead and start our descent. So coming up top, we're going to set our altitude target down to 19,000. And I'm using all my mouse controls, that way you guys don't miss anything. 19,000, then I'm going to hit vertical speed, and then you can see nose down is rolling it forward. So we're going to start pitching the nose down, and we're going to look for that 2,000 feet per minute. We're probably going to reach our altitude long before we get there. Now, the other thing you need to do when you're using vertical speed, notice our airspeed. It's going to climb fast if you don't pull that throttle back. So we're going to pull the throttle way off here. We want to maintain, you know, right about 210, 220 knots indicated. You can see here's our true airspeed. We're pushing 320 knots. So we're cooking right along. But you can pull the power way off, and this is where you save a lot in fuel too. I mean, 2,000 feet per minute, honestly, we're cooking. That's a fast descent for given the altitude that we have to drop. And you can see, as I pointed out before on Navigraph, here's our aircraft right here. So we're going to come down to 19,000. When we get to long Z, we're going to set to 16,000 and keep stepping down. Now, it's real important to maintain your speed. Keep an eye on your speed. Keep an eye on any traffic out in front of you. Keep an eye on your avoidance altitudes. Make sure that you stay above any clearance altitudes, you know, to keep from smashing into a mountain face, etc. And this is why I like using the star charts. That sounds like something out of Star Trek, huh? Checking the star charts, Captain. Doing great, number one. Yeah, see, so we descended very quickly. Well, I mean, not too bad. We're a little ahead. I probably could have gotten away with 1,000 feet on that descent, but that's okay. My preference, when I'm flying like this, you know, I'm not using ATC, I like to be ahead of the game. And that's just because, I don't like... If you get behind the curve, where you're having to make up altitude very quickly, it feels more chaotic. And then you feel like you spend the whole rest of the flight trying to catch up and keep things on track. So I'd much rather be at my target altitude long beforehand, as long as I'm not breaking, restriction. which we're not here. Again, looking at our chart, we're allowed to be at flight level 190 here. So, you know, as long as I'm not busting my altitudes or breaking restrictions, I don't feel guilty for it. And then again, when you reach your target altitude, again, you're going to have to watch your airspeed and make sure that you add power to maintain. So we're going to bring our power back up. And that's one of the advantages to managing your descent a little more smoother than what I've done here. If you nail down that, that 1,000 feet, 1,500 foot descent rates, is you don't find yourself messing with the RPMs as much. You know, if you get that nice descent rate, you know, it's just like driving a car. The more that you're on and off the gas, the more gas you actually end up burning. Anyway, you know, something comes with practice. I don't pretend to be a professional. Just helping others smooth out the curve is all I'm trying to do with these guides. Now, the next thing we can do to sort of get ahead of the game here is looking at our approach chart. So we're going to go to the approach for a second, and we're going to come down to the ILS 34 left while we have time. And we're going to look at our ILS frequency. Okay, you can see our final course heading should be 353 degrees with an ILS frequency of 111.9er. Okay, and then we can see the ILS ID as India Delta X-ray uniform. Let's go ahead and put that into the nav radio so it's there and ready. So we'll come down to our radios, and I'm going to use the right one here for this. Maybe. There we go. Just didn't have the camera pointing down quite enough. Go to audio and radios, select nav 1, and I'm going to type in the 111.9er. Now you can do the enter and it will put in standby, or if you just tap the transfer button, it immediately sends it to the active frequency. And that way, when we activate the approach mode later, the ILS frequency will already be there, and we can just switch to the VOR or the nav radio as our source, which you guys will see later. But that's all done. We know that's there and ready to go for us. All right, let's get back into the star here and take a look at where we're at. All right, so we've passed the long Z. Now it's time to get her down to about 16,000 feet. So let's get on that. Now we're back in altitude hold, so it's going to be the same game as before, taking her down to 16,000 and going to vertical descent or vertical speed. And I'm going to pull it down. Let's do 1,500 this time. Again, sort of judge it. Once you start learning what the aircraft's capable of, you know, you'll get more and more comfortable. You'll be able to set up your descents the way you like. And I'm pulling that power off to make sure we don't overspeed. Remember, at the next waypoint here, we need to be below 250 knots, so we need to maintain that. Coming below 18,000 feet, so we need to set our altimeters now. And our altimeter, according to the guide, is 3008, so we're going to set that. There's the standby. And there's our primary. Alright, so altimeter set. Now we're coming through 18,000 feet. One of the good things to do here, you can either do it here or as you get a little bit lower, but you just want to make sure you turn it on. We're going to get that inertial separator turned back on. Again, we're starting to get into that FOD altitude, you know, birds, things like that. Anything that gets sucked up into the intake, we want to make sure it doesn't go into the engine. So, inertial separator back on for the descent. We will get a master caution here in a minute letting us know that it's on. Again, remember that you are going to lose torque when turning on the inertial separator as well, so pay attention to your airspeed. Approaching that target altitude, and we hit it right about on the money. Still a little early, but not too bad. And from here, we'll be coming down to 15,000. And we can go ahead and set that once we switch into altitude mode. And there's that master caution for the inertial separator. Altitude mode is set. I'm going to set our target down to 15,000 for now. Once we clear the waypoint, and there it is, we can continue to descend. So, vertical speed. And it already remembered the previous configuration because we hadn't completed the descent yet. So just keep coming back down. Looking at 198 knots. And from here, all I'm going to do is keep following these restrictions all the way down to 11,000. So I'll catch you guys as soon as we're back down to 11,000. Once we reach the high mom waypoint, I'll be back with you guys. Alright guys, so there's something going on here that I want to show you guys real quick that's not in the guide, and the reason why it's not in the guide is because I'm hoping this will be resolved soon. There is a bug right now that involving these user waypoints here. The second that we get to this user waypoint, the aircraft's going to sort of either A, just fly off into the distance, or it may turn around, or it does all kinds of weird stuff in these situations. So what we're going to want to do is after we pass high mom, okay, so once we get here, we're going to want to make sure that we select the teller waypoint and set it as direct. Okay, then once we fly direct to the teller waypoint, the aircraft should pick up and resume the rest of its course. Either that, or you can do manual heading mode, which actually maybe we'll do that instead. Maybe we'll get to high mom, we'll go into heading mode, and then resume once we pass the user waypoint. It's really retarded. Not quite sure why it does it, but anyway, I just wanted you guys to be aware that that's in place. It's not in the guide, again, because I'm hoping it'll be resolved soon. So anyway, so unpause the simulator and we'll keep on moving. So we have reached the high mom waypoint, so now I'm going to go into heading mode, or tap the heading button, make the heading bug centered, and I'm just going to tap the heading button. So we're no longer going to be flying the flight plan for a second here. We're going to wait until we reach closer to teller. You can zoom in a bit here. Staying off course just a little bit until we get into a better position to intercept it. The other thing is, now that we've passed high mom, so we're clearing the approach, or clearing the star, now it's time to start looking at the approach chart. So looking at the approach chart, we can see here's our aircraft here. Okay, we're going to be heading up to teller, which is right about here, and then it'll turn, we'll come on to collar. Okay, and here's teller here, and here's collar, so you guys can see how this is sort of going to go down. All right, we need to be 11,500 or 11,000, coming down to 10,500, 10,000, 10,000 by collar. Okay, at 10,000 feet, we got a few more things that we're going to adjust and configure in the aircraft, but should be pretty straightforward. And we can make our heading 049 degrees if we choose, but I'm probably still going to fly the flight plan to bring it in once we pass this point. I'm going to speed time up a bit here. Make this part go a little faster. Alright, so from here we should be able to go back in a nav mode. Nope, it's taking us back to that direct. So we're going to click on teller, and we're going to go direct to, and hit activate teller. There we go. And from here, it should resume the flight plan. And that's one of the things that it does with that user waypoint. Even try to hit, if you try to resume the flight plan, even after you pass it, apparently it still tries to go all the way back to the start of that leg. And it's really retarded. Next thing in preparation, we're going to be setting our altitude down to 10,000 feet for our next leg. And actually what I'm going to do, well, yeah, because we're a little early. We'll just hold off there for now. So it's intercepting the waypoint. We're going to get a hard left turn here in a minute. At least we should. But the different bugs and things like that, honestly, sometimes they add the fun to it because it makes us do some of that pilot stuff. Yep, there's the intercept. Now we should come back around the other direction. Nope, nope. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is click on Alpine and hit activate leg to waypoint. There we go. So you guys get to see a little bit more than what's actually in the guide at this time. Now all the stuff will be in the guide at some point in future updates. It just it's not in this current rendition. But these are things that will be coming in the next one on how to get around things like this. Going to speed time up a bit again. And bring it back down. All right, perfect. And I could have tried that previously. Again, my worry was that that leg was between teller and that user waypoint, and I was just worried about it causing more problems than it solves. Again, hopefully that bug gets resolved soon. It's been around for quite a while now, honestly, so just got to be patient. Got to be patient. That's what we do. Alright, so from the teller location at this point, it is time to start our descent again. So we're going to go vertical speed and kick her on down. Let's do about 1,000 feet per minute. Watching that airspeed. Now as we approach 10,000 feet, we need to come back up top. Get that landing light turned on, make sure the strobe lights are on, nav lights are active, any other lighting that we need for the externals, but still daylight, so we should be good there. The other thing I like to do is we can set, let's see what our distance is here. Let's scroll out a bit. We're still a ways away. 25 nautical miles. You could probably activate the VOR to pick up the ILS signal, but I like to hold off a little bit longer. We'll wait until we get to the collar waypoint, and then we'll intercept. So we're on our way there now. But altimeter is set, landing lights are on, inertial separator is on. Everything else is ready to go. Approach speed, once it gets time, we'll be looking for 85 knots on the approach. Flare angle, we'll be looking at anywhere between 4 and 7 degrees. Anything lower than that, you take a risk of either a nose wheel landing or striking the propeller, which I've heard is bad. Descent onto the threshold, you'll be looking at about 2 degree line, negative 2 degrees. But hopefully that all goes well. With the autopilot active, it'll be pretty quick and pretty smooth. You guys will see what that looks like here in just a second here. Alright, so we're inside 20 miles about. Yeah, right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and set the FMS or the CDI over to the VOR1. That's going to be our localizer. Now you can see what happened here. Okay, the aircraft sort of jerked there for a second. Not picking up any data yet, but there's our nav frequency. And there it is. We just acquired it. So we're at 19 miles out. You can see it's been identified. There's the India Delta X-ray uniform that we discussed earlier. And again, identified up here as well. And we now have our distance. All right, so the localizer has been acquired. So what I'm going to do here with the localizer acquired is hit our approach mode. You can see the GS pops up on the screen. That means it's searching for the glide slope, but it's also going to get us onto the runway heading. Now we also should be descending down to 9,000 according to our approach plate, so we're going to get that going. And the glide slope actually just got acquired. So I didn't even have to hit anything. You can see the glide slope turned green. That means it locked it. the diamond is our glide slope. And so what the aircraft is doing is pitching nose down to capture it. Now I'm going to pull some of that throttle off. Make sure we don't get going too fast. Remember I said speed is critical here. About 8 miles away, we'll start looking into landing gear and things like that. Make those screens a little brighter. There we go. So starting to capture the glide slope. We're now at 12 miles away. As we capture the glide slope, the descent angle should reduce. We'll start slowing down a bit more. Pulling that throttle way off right now. Once we get below 178 knots, we can drop the landing gear and stage 1 flaps, takeoff flaps. You can see the radar altimeter comes alive below 2,500 feet above ground level. Still 10 out. We're 2 knots on the high, but I'm going to go ahead and go take off flaps. We can set our escape altitude that to about 7,500 feet for 2,000 feet above ground level. 7,300 feet, I guess. 7 miles out, landing gear coming down. Now it's going to add quite a bit of drag, so be ready for that. 122 knots or below, we can go landing flaps. There it is. So full flaps. Now we're looking for the 85 knots on the approach. So just going to let her keep slowing down until we get there. And what I'm going to be looking for is between 5 and 200 feet here. We're going to disengage yaw damper and autopilot. Now you can do this any point that you're comfortable. You can fly it visually in all the way if you'd like. So we're at 350. I'm going to go yaw damper off, autopilot off. Airplane's mine. Pitching nose up just a bit, trying to bleed some more of that speed off. And it actually looks like, yeah, that those flaps didn't come all the way down for some reason. There we go. There's that pitch up. All right, so I need to increase power a little bit. We got a little slow. Get that nose back down. You're for about that -2 degrees on the down angle. Should be looking at about 85 knots, but 85 knots she wants to climb. I'm sure that's the bug that's currently in existence. There's 50 feet. 0 throttle. Looking for that 4 degrees angle of pitch. Wheels are down. Main wheels down. Lightly on the brakes. You can use the reverse prop if you need, although don't typically need it with this aircraft. Alright. As soon as we've cleared the runway completely, stop the aircraft here. And let's get those flaps up. Why does that keep happening? That's so weird. Taxi lights on, strobe lights off. Weather radar, if it's turned on, needs to go to standby. And any de-icing systems need to be off as well. Alright. And we can clear or confirm flaps are in the up position. Inertial separator remains on during taxi. And now we'll taxi to the parking and shut her down. Alright, so we've reached general parking here. I doubt it really has all these goofy terrain issues, but it is what it is. Close enough. All right, so for shutdown, let's go ahead and set the parking brake. Come up top, make sure all external lights are off. Internal lights off as needed. Oxygen master switch off. Fuel selection set to manual. Trims turned off. Bleed switch turned off. Throttle to idle for 2 minutes. Now I'm not going to make you guys sit here for 2 minutes. Then we're going to go into low idle for 15 seconds. Maybe. Again, this part can be a bit of a pain in the butt. There we go. And finally, cut off. Again, I know that wasn't exactly 15 seconds. Trying to make this quick for you guys. Inertial separator turned off. Auxiliary boost pumps off. And generator off, source off. Oh, I hate that it does that. And crash lever down. And for our particular situation, unlock the door. Open the the baggage compartment. Unlock passenger door. And let our people out. Well, guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope this guide is something that you guys find very useful to you. Again, purchase instructions at the beginning of the video. All the information that you guys saw in this video is in the guide, with the exception of the bug fixes in regards to the user waypoint, but they will be at a later time should that not be resolved anytime soon. All right, but I hope you guys take care, and thank you for the continued support, and I'll see you in the next one.